Hello students, welcome to another session of online video lessons. Today we are going to look into the semester 3 prose lesson. I am Bangla Bharati, Associate Professor of English working at Vivekananda Government Degree College, Adikmet Road, Vidyanagar, Hyderabad. So today we are going to do a prose lesson by Rabindranath Tagore. The title of the prose text is A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. So give me a minute. I'll just upload the PowerPoint. Yes. I hope you can see the PPT. A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise, Semester 3, Unit 1, Prose Lesson by Rabindranath Tagore. This is actually written in Bengali, but the text that you have is a translated version from Bengali into English by Bhavani Bhattacharya. All the images used in this PowerPoint slide are used from Google Downloads, which are free downloads, and the excerpts of the text that I have shown are from the textbook, and the quotes from Tagore's interview published in Outlook Express, which is on the website. It is available for a free download. Now, Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. To begin with, some questions to think. Before we begin the lesson, we usually do a pre-reading or pre-thinking of what kind of a background to the text. So first and foremost, what are your hobbies? Think about it. Do you have any hobby? Do you like arts like painting, dance, sculpture, music, puppetry, any kind of art form? Do you like fine arts? Did you ever practice? Do you have a hobby? Did you learn any art form when you were in school or participated in school day activities, cultural activities for an annual day? Were you in the group dance or a group song or a theater or a drama? Any of the performances? Did you ever participate? Did you ever take an interest in doing that? Were you good at it? Think about these questions. And did you take art seriously or you just took it as a hobby? Okay, school, teachers forced, I joined. I did, but I'm actually not interested. Or did you enjoy doing it? Did you enjoy learning something new? If yes, then did you consider pursuing it as a career or you just left it? And coming to the art forms or fine arts, we see that they are a part of our family, they are part of our life. For example, is there anyone in your house, maybe your mother, aunt, a cousin, or an uncle who has artistic abilities, who's very good at drawing, or who's very good at making things of paper, or maybe weaving baskets, doing embroidery, or a mirror work, or making some wall hanging with the waste material available at home? You would be seeing some creative talent in everyone, especially people in the house, neighbors in the neighborhood. You find that every human being is bestowed with some artistic ability or the other. Don't you think so? So did you ever pursue such an art form? And did you ever think of you pursuing it or making it a career? And can your hobby become a career? Do you have any example of somebody who started it as a hobby and made it into their own full-time career? What value do you think art or artists have in our society? Like I can give an example. hobby as a career, Kailash Kher, you all know, very well-known folk singer. He was a folk singer belonging to his particular place. It was a very, very restricted form. But when he moved into films, he brought in that folklore into his voice, and you know how popular he became. In the same way, you know the age-old black and white period music composer Naushad Ali, very, very popular. Actually, in those days when he was working for the films as a film composer, society was not, what do you say, kind of agreeing or looking up or respecting for people who work in the film industry. So when he got a marriage proposal, he was introduced to his in-laws, his future wife, as what does the boy do? They said, boy is a tailor, he has a business, he has some people under him, he makes clothes for film industry. That's how he was introduced. But then when his wedding happened, the band baja that was performing before the barat, they were playing the music composition that he composed just a while ago for a particular film. Later, he became a very famous music composer. So while pursuing a hobby and making it into a full-time career, what are your approaches? What does the society think? Have to think about these. What guides, what tells you to take this as a career and that as not as a career? For example, like hobby becoming a career, I can take the example of very well-known painter Lakshman Ele. When he started, he was criticized. The parents said, we are from a lower middle class family, and art and painting, this is for people who have lots of money and they don't know what to do with it. We are from a lower middle class family, so don't ever pursue this as a career, because you will end up only painting signboards or name plates or shop titles. Only that you will, or maximum you can go is you paint a hoarding. You will construct a hoarding bus stand. You will be painting that. So that was a criticism initially, but still the family persisted, family supported, and he pursued his hobby. And now you know that he's a world famous painter, and the person from Telangana, coming from a rural background, portraying the rural culture of Telangana state. You know how well, how popular he is. In the similar fashion, you have the artist Babu, who is a very good painter. And you have caricature artist Shankar, who started with cartoons in the newspaper, and he won world level awards for his caricatures. And I can also give you like many examples, but then what value do you think art or artists have in our society? How do we understand this value? How do we estimate the value of anything? Is it considered valuable if it brings you a certain amount of income every month? Or is it useful in some way that people will look up to it? Or is usefulness only criteria to judge value? Do all things that are useful give us happiness? And is everything that gives us happiness useful? Now, these are the questions you have to think and find answers. Because if you have your opinion, then as we go on and move into the lesson, when we read the text, you will understand it in more details. But for that understanding to come in, you have to have your own opinions. What do you think will make you happy? There are people who watch comedy shows. I know most of my students, they play PUBG, and whenever they beat somebody at the game, they keep shouting, winner, winner, chicken dinner. All these make you happy. But then how does the society view it? At home, I'm sure your parents would be criticizing you and telling you to stop playing with your mobile, as playing PUBG will not feed you in future. So if you're writing poetry, if you're singing songs, one thing that they will tell you is, okay, this is for a part-time, for your time pass to make you happy, do it. But these songs, these games will not feed you in future. They can't become a full-fledged career where it will provide some kind of income that will fulfill your basic needs. So what purpose do the arts serve? And why do artists pursue art? When did this art start? And history of art is as old as human history. Human beings, right from the Stone Age to the modern age, as long as the human race is continuing, however old it is, that old is art also. You can see the cave paintings when the Neolithic man, when the human beings were living in caves, even that time they painted in the caves. The old cave paintings, if you see, I've put some pictures of it. Old cave paintings too. During the Buddhist period, the Ajanta, Ellora caves and those paintings. What does it tell? That art was there right from the beginning of the human race and it is continuing. But the forms may vary. It is taking different forms and shapes as the time is passing. And not only in India, all over the world, if you look, art is a kind of representation of a human culture, and art preserves human history, a particular race's culture, tradition, values, all in the form of the art forms. They could be painting, it could be music, it could be construction, it could be a style of architecture or any other. Now, if you look at these Buddhist paintings here, all the Buddhist monasteries across the world over, wherever Buddhism was spread, you find specific paintings of the life story of Lord Buddha. The first slide picture onto the left is from the Buddhist temple and the middle picture is from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, there's a very well-known Buddhist pilgrimage centers and the temples, which are now well protected by the government there. So Lankan people have preserved this Dambola caves. In those caves, you have these cave paintings. And coming to the Egypt, we all know the stories of Cleopatra. We all know the story of pyramid and the Sphinx. And in the pyramid, you have these Egyptian paintings. You can check the last bottom line. The first two photographs are from the Egyptian pyramids, the Egyptian art. And the last one is the Amaravati Stupa of our own state, Telugu state. So what does it mean? Indian temples and the sculptures and the architecture, the finish and the intricate designs that they made, the artists made. Why did the kings do it? Why did we construct all these things? Why did we preserve this art? Why did the kings and the previous rulers spend so much time, energy, money in these constructions? What is it? What is the purpose? Think of the purpose. What is the purpose? Why did they do it? And why are we looking at all these artists and artistic structures? And why are we preserving it as a heritage? So every art, it's not only for art's sake. There is a greater purpose. Art is for art's sake is one way of calling it. But the greater purpose is to preserve the culture, tradition, and hand it over to the next generation. Now we are talking about the painters, I said, who are the very well-known painters of India. Here are few photographs. Now in future, sometime when you are attempting any of the competitive exams or online video questions or quiz programs, you are bound to find this kind of questions. A picture is given and you will be asked to identify who that person is. These are all the first generation painters of India. Satish Gujral, Nandalal Bose, Jaimini Roy, Jatin Das, Raja Ravi Verma, Abanindranath Tagore, S.H. Raza, M.F. Hussain, Tayyab Mehta, Amrita Shergill and F.N. Souza. These are all the first generation of very well-known painters of Indian subcontinent who made Indian art popular abroad also. But also one thing, how did they become very popular? What was the means? By which association they became quite popular? And when is it that they are recognized by the society? One thing is, in India or in any place across the world, if culture, cricket are the two C's where whoever is related to that, they will be popular, especially in a country like India. Crime, cricket and culture. It is a well-known saying in the journalist circles that only three things become very popular: and people's attention immediately comes onto them. That is cinema, cricket, and crime. So any artist related to the film industry or cinematic background, they are bound to become popular. Any artist, if he or she is associated with cricket, they become very popular. You can look back at the examples of the popular figures and you will know that in some way or the other, they are related or associated with the film industry or the sport cricket. Anyway, coming back to our lesson text, art for art's sake. That is seems to be the main theme of A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. This is written by Rabindranath Tagore. Original work was in Bengali, though Tagore wrote in English also. This particular story was originally written in Bengali. It's translated into English by Bhavani Bhattacharya, who is also a very well-known writer. Now, look at the title, A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. What do you mean, a wrong man? Somebody who is misplaced, somebody who is wronged or who doesn't fit. And what's a worker's paradise? We all know that we come from a system which believes if you are good in this lifetime, after your death, you will go to heaven. If you are bad, you will go to hell, Swargam Narakam, right? Now that heaven is paradise. And what is worker's paradise? How many kinds of paradises are there? And one wrong man in a worker's paradise, what will happen? So think about these things. Now, this text, as is the case with all Tagore's texts, goes a level very, very deep. Like at the surface level, when you read the story, you have a different meaning. But when you read Tagore's life, when you know what is Tagore's childhood history, his biography, and when you read the story, you get a different version. And in the modern sense, when there are different kinds of people in a society and where we have to accept everyone, artists, Dalits, people, feminists, and LGBTQ community, when all these are part of our society, with that kind of an awareness, when you read the story, it gives a different meaning. So for each level of understanding, there is a different level of way the story relates to you. That is the greatness or universality of Rabindranath Tagore. So let's look into his biography. Tagore, as you all know, we've been reading and studying his poems right from school age till the intermediate and now in degree also. He is the only non-European or the only Asian to have received the Nobel Prize for Literature for his collection of poems, Gitanjali. This was in the year 1913. And he was given the honorific Gurudev by Mahatma Gandhi himself. And both were very good friends till Tagore's passing away, till Mahatma Gandhi's death. And for the world, Tagore became the voice of India's spiritual heritage. And for India, especially for the Bengal region, he became a great living institution in itself. And Tagore was a polymath. He was multi-talented, multifaceted. I really wonder for a human being to have so many talents in one person. He was a poet, he was a novelist, he's a playwright, educationist, lyricist, painter, philosopher, music composer, and he founded an experimental school, Shantiniketan. How could he do so many things? Behind that, you have to know a few details about his childhood, which will give you kind of an orientation or which will make you understand him as a person better and understand his writings even more better. Now, Tagore's Gitanjali is a collection of poems which won the Nobel Prize. And as is the Tagore's case with all his works, each person, when you read it at a surface level, there is a meaning. From a spirituality point of view, there's a meaning. From a worldly point of view, there's a meaning. So different kinds of meanings based on your IQ and your level of understanding. That's the greatness, and that's why he's called the Gurudev. About Tagore, he comes from a huge extended joint family. I mean, In those days, the families were very huge. He was born as the youngest of the 13 children of Debendranath Tagore, who started this Brahmo Samaj in Bengal. And Brahma Samaj advocates one world, one religion, no caste, no such feelings. So that is the kind of background or the atmosphere in which Tagore was born. Youngest of the 13 children. Imagine he was the youngest and he lost his mother at a very young age. So he was brought up by ayahs and servants and maids. And his father was, as I told you, he started for one of the founder members of the Brahma Samaj, advocates of the Brahma Samaj. He was involved in the renaissance of Bengali culture. And this was before the Bengal partition, when Bengal was one united state. East Bengal, West Bengal. West Bengal, now we know it. The East Bengal, before it was Bangladesh. Now it is Bangladesh, but before it was one united huge state of Bengal. So for the cultural renaissance of Bengal, Debendranath Tagore was seriously involved and he was always traveling on this work. So Tagore could never see his father, but all his elder brothers were like the guiding lights for him. And in those days, Debendranath ensured that all his children learn English. They could all learn English, they could read English, and they were very good at it. In fact, his elder brother was a barrister. One of the other brother was a theater person. The other person was a music director, composer, and the other used to take care of the estates. And one of his sisters is also an artist. So out of 13 children, he's the youngest. So a lot of pampering happened because he's a motherless child also. That also adds, but there was a kind of discipline. Tagore was, as I told you, he's also a lyricist, composer of music. He composed over almost during his time more than 2000 songs. Imagine 2000 songs, writing and composing music for that and then making it perform. So a different genre of music evolved that is now called Rabindra Sangeet, which Rabindranath Tagore had started. It has evolved into a genre in itself. And Tagore is unique for being the official composer for the national anthems of two countries. One is India's Jana Gana Mana and Bangladesh Amar Shonar Bangla. These two are the national anthems that Rabindranath Tagore composed. As I told you, he was a polymath, multi-talented personality. And throughout his life, he was learning something or the other. He was doing something creative or the other. In fact, towards the fag end of his life, when he was 60 years of old or that time, he started painting. He started learning to paint and he started painting it. Not only that, he also experimented in Ayurveda as science. So he had this natural interest in science also. And another trivia, some information, extra information is Tagore started painting at the age of 60, I told you, but he was also a color blind, red-green color blind. So he couldn't differentiate fine shades of red and green put together. So all his paintings that were done after the age of 60 had a different color scheme. Because he was colorblind, now because of this modern technology, when these paintings are again put in the proper red and green format, they appear different. So this is about Tagore, and not only that, every place, even in Bengal and India and world across, you find his sayings very, very touching, very, very relevant. For example, on love, he had so many nice things to say. Love's gift cannot be given. It waits to be accepted, by Tagore. And Tagore's childhood, he also wrote an autobiography, kind of an essay or his life story, which was published in the Outlook Express or the Indian Express. He says when he was a child, he never liked going to school. So long as I was forced to attend school, I felt an unbearable torture. And later he realized that what weighed on his mind was the unnatural pressure of a system of education that prevailed everywhere. So it is being drilled into the Indian psychology or Indian mentality that you have to study after primary school, middle school, then high school, then pre-intermediate, then after that college, after college, university. Only when you pass all these stages, you will find a job. When you find a job, you'll earn a living. When you earn a living, you will earn some income. You will get some respectability in the society. So there is an unnatural pressure on the system of education that everybody pressurizes children to attend school, to follow a discipline, to study, study, and study. But then all work and no play will make Jack a dull boy, right? And because he hated going to school, he was also a rebel. And he's the youngest of all. He was pampered. So when he rebelled, it was, he says it was an awful thing because he comes from a very respectable family. And the elders did not know how to deal with this phenomena. Child youngest, all the brothers are settled well in life. They went to good schools, some went to London, finished their studies abroad and returned. And here is the boy who refuses to go to school, who never wants to attend school. Instead, he wants to play in the garden under the banyan tree, listen to the stories that the maids and servants tell. He just wants to be in the nature. So they didn't know how to handle with this boy. They tried all kinds of persuasion, vigorous, gentle, then finally they gave up. Okay, do whatever you want to do, do. And when this freedom entered, when Tagore was allowed this freedom, when he was set free, that's when he says, in his own words, I undertook the task of playing schoolmaster to myself and found it to be a delightful game. I pored over any book that came my way. Not school selected textbooks alone that I didn't understand, but I filled up the gaps of understanding out of my own imagination. When you become your own school teacher, when you become your own school, then you are responsible for all your actions. That's how Tagore started tutoring himself, training himself. He studied, he read vigorously. He was a voracious reader. He read so much that, I mean, the amount of reading that went, you can understand by looking at his writings. As I told you, the more you listen, the better you will be able to speak. The more you read, that knowledgeable you become and that perfect your writing will be. So this is about Tagore, how he was self-taught. And while this self-tutoring phase, he found poetry, art, and music. He says in his own words, I quote, absconding from school, never taking a test, never passing an examination, I was not sure where I stood. My mind wandered everywhere. That's when he discovered that verses and rhymes were made by ordinary men and women, and that caught his attention. Even he started writing poetry. Then he published his poems as a book. At the age of 11, when the traditional culture, the Upanayana is done, the Janu ceremony, that's when a boy of the house is free to travel and should be introduced to the adult world. After 11 years, then Tagore traveled with his father to their estate in Shantiniketan. That was an estate then. From there, he traveled along his father to Amritsar, where they had some properties, then to Dalhousie, a small hill station in the foothills of Himalayas. During this time, his journey with his father, till then he never knew his father. Father was always traveling and establishing Brahma Samaj, and he was advocating that aspect, right? So he never knew, but here this traveling helped him understand his father, understand the world, look at the world from a worldly perspective. Later, his father sent him to London to study law, but Tagore was not the person who would be restricted by a system or a discipline. He joined, but then he studied Shakespeare, made lots of friends, and he left London. He came back to India without any proper degree. And he made many friends and met well-known personalities in London, and Albert Einstein happens to be his friend. In the same way, the Writers of the time, W.B. Yeats and many other philosophers were very good friends of Tagore. Later stage, Tagore traveled all over the world to read his poetry, to deliver lectures, and that is the other phase of his life. Now, other milestones, because he was self-tutored, Tagore also learned from his brothers astronomy, astrology, planetary sciences and all that, and joined the theatre group of his brother. And by the age of 16, he was a popular as a playwright. And in your semester degree UG course, semester 3, now let me show you the textbook. This is your second year textbook, which has two parts again. Part 1 is semester 3, part 2 is semester 4. Semester 3, you have his short story, A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. Now, this story is humorous and answers many questions that we discussed in the beginning, like what is art, what value does it have, can you take your hobby as a career, if yes, how does the society view it, if no, why, what is stopping you. All these, maybe you'll find some answers here in this particular story, Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise. Now, we will follow a particular methodology here. I have divided the text into smaller chunks, okay? Now, before reading each chunk, there are a set of questions. You read the questions, and while reading the text, try to find answers to the questions, okay? For reading the paragraph, first you read the questions and then note down the questions. Then you should be taken to the slide where the full text is there. Looking at the text, you try to find the answers. Shall we start? So 3 minutes to read the question and another 3 minutes to find the answers. Now, first paragraph, the questions are, what did the man indulge in? What did he make during his time on earth? How did he spend his time, or how did he waste his time? What happened after his death? That's compared to some boys who never read their books. And what did the aerial messenger do? These are the questions. Now here is the text. I'll give you some time to answer the text. Read it. I'll keep the time. I'll give you exactly 3 minutes. So what did the man do? Indulged in? What did he do in his time on earth? How did he spend his time? How did he waste his time? What happened after his death? Let's look at the questions again. What did the man indulge in? Yes, please read it. I'll keep the time. If you are watching this video on your mobile, then you can pause, increase the font size, read. If you have the text, nothing like it. If you have the textbook with you, which we usually advise every student, it's better to keep your text with you and read it. Okay. What did the man indulge in? He indulged in whims. Whims are silly ideas. What did he do? What did he make? He made little pieces. Whim is an unusual desire, impulse. What you feel like, you do it, just like that. And what did he make? He made little pieces of sculpture of men, women, castles, quaint earthen things. Quaint is something which is attractive because it is old fashioned. Quaint earthen things dotted over with seashells. So, to put it in one word, he painted. So, did he use his time, spend his time? Author says he wasted his time. He wasted his time on all that was useless and unnecessary. People laughed at him, and sometimes he would vow to shake off that his mad whims, but his mad whims would keep clinging onto his mind. And like some boys who never spend much time on reading a book, flying is reading or spending much time seriously on studying the books, but still in the final exam they all pass, right? Similar thing happened with this particular man. He spent all his life in unnecessary things, unnecessary work on planet Earth, yet after his death, the gates of heavens flung open for him. So when we look at the questions, what did the man indulge in? Whims. And what did he make? He made little things of men, women, sculptures dotted with seashells and all that. How did he waste his time? By doing all these wasteful things, useless things. That means he painted. What happened after his death? That's compared to some boys who never read their books. Like boys who never read their books, but still final exam, they all pass like that. This person, when he died, he went to heaven. And what happened at heaven? The moving finger, which is the fate or destiny, that writes even in heavens. So it came that the aerial messenger, the Devaduta or the Chitragupta, whoever you can call, who is in charge of the man, he made a mistake and he found a place for him in workers' paradise. This is the first paragraph. I hope you have understood. Shall we move on? Now, what is this workers' paradise? What do you find it there? Now, the questions for the next paragraph, these are the questions. What kind of place is workers' paradise? What do the people living in that paradise always say? How did the newcomer spend his time in workers' paradise? Why did he not fit in the scheme of things in the paradise? 5 questions. Now, here is your text. You can read it. I'll give you 3 minutes time to find the answers. Your time starts now. What kind of place is this paradise? What do you find it? What do the people say? What do the men say? What do women say? Now this newcomer, the wrong man, what did he do in the paradise? How did he spend his time? Okay.